Hello, 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 and welcome aboard to our stream today. We got some huge X-Men announcements, really big X-Men stories just on the horizon that I'm so excited to go ahead and get into here. And we had an absolutely, I think, massive week just in terms of releases and news stories here. Over on the channel this week, we had a really fantastic review over of Birds of Prey issue 4. I'm just continually impressed with the craft over on that series coming in over from Kelly Thompson and Leonardo Romero. You just can't miss all of the hijinks that ensue as our birds fight over against Wonder Woman. It was so cool in that issue how it was like each individual member of our birds was tasked with facing up against Diana herself. It was just a really phenomenal issue. So happy with that, how that series is shaking out. I think there's a really cool roster of characters, and we finally have a comic book like a platform where they're really able to showcase some of their abilities in a venue with just beautiful and staggering art. You absolutely cannot afford to miss Birds of Prey issue 4. Elsewhere this week, we also had X-Men 29. I think that was nothing short of a really fantastic, a really phenomenal issue over on X-Men 29. It was super cool how so many individual pieces of comics have all started to lead up over to Doctor Doom and what some of his plans are over with the Latverian mutants. It was such a thrill learning more about some of those brand new mutant characters and getting introduced to them just on the heels of the Follow the House of X storyline. Right now, for me, it feels like the X-Men are in like the late stages of Krakoa here. So the idea of introducing more mutants, I think, really moves the Marvel Universe in a very, very different direction. Also, I am very surprised actually to say that so far I am enjoying Amazing Spider-Man's current Gang War storyline. Very early on into the narrative. I think when we first heard this storyline was announced, I was a little bit more apprehensive towards it just because of the subject matter itself. I'm not the biggest fan of like these organized mafia, gang type storylines, but I think author Zeb Wells and artist John Romita Jr. have just done a phenomenal job, like establishing all these character relationships and really building towards something big with the gang war. Particularly, I've enjoyed Janice Lincoln and Randy Robertson. My name is Arakko Braddock. I want to officially welcome you to our stream today. We have so much to talk about, particularly in response to the X-Men franchise. We are still at the point where the X-Men comics are just my absolute favorite thing being published right now by, I think, any other force in comics. I am just so mesmerized by the way that all these comic books connect to each other. And I think as we approach the very last stages of Krakoa, the level of horror is just really amping up all across these new X-Men titles. I just had a chance to peek at one of the latest issues covers over from the Resurrection of Magneto. It is so horrific. We will be exploring that in so much detail here. Honestly, once again, I am just shocked at the level of like psychological horror that all these X-Men books are starting to evoke. I mean, I think Immortal X-Men is just a great impetus for this because the way that Professor Xavier has like reopened up the plot threads with Sins of Sinister has just given the book this entire horror bend to it. I feel like over in X-Men Red, some of those characters never really recovered after Judgment Day, and their incarnation of Fall of X involving the character of Genesis in the Genesis War, I think is absolutely going to have some really massive impact over on Arakko and the world of X-Men Red. Also, frankly, this Wednesday, another comic book involving the X-Men that I am so just head over heels excited to talk about. We're actually going to be covering it much later over on the stream, is going to be involving Dark X-Men. I am just head over heels for Spider-Man's current Dark Web storyline, or the Dark Web storyline that happened actually quite a few issues ago over in the main Spider-Man series. But in the aftermath of that storyline, the Limbo Embassy was established over in New York. It seemed like after the fall of X, the Limbo Embassy was one of the last standing places that the mutants had operating like officially. And I think with the last issue of Dark X-Men, now the Limbo Embassy is at risk of falling at the hands of the incredibly deadly Orcus. I am so excited to jump into all these news stories with you today. We're going to go ahead and start with one that I just heard about involving and actually different artist over at Marvel. But first off, I do want to catch up a little bit with our chat here. Cliff Woodbury, welcome to the stream. Cliff says, I guess in pertaining to the gang war over at Spider Man, this gang war should have been done long ago. I would have loved if they had paid attention to the street level characters and had one of these events in the 70s and 90s. Marvel has forgotten more street level IPS they have forgotten than they now use, and it's sad that they've concentrated solely on cosmic stories. Cliff Woodbury, I would just say in response to that, are you reading the main Amazing Spider-Man series? I think the book has done a fantastic job juggling all these plot threads. I'm particularly mystified by the way the series has utilized the character of like Randy Robertson and Janice Lincoln. We've seen Randy take on like so many different contexts. We've seen him, work on the side of the Angels over with Luke Cage. We've seen him, work in a more like criminal aesthetic over with the character of Janice. I just think the Amazing Spider-Man is really using the gang war to establish the character relationships between their supporting cast in like a much higher profile. Also, there's something that Zeb Wells wants to say about the character of Tombstone, and I think the gang war is just a fantastic place to really change up that status quo and let Tombstone and Peter Parker get a little bit closer together. Honestly, and also, I'm interested in reading about people's criticisms, but I wish they were more pointed at the book. I wish they were a little bit more focused because it's a little bit difficult to argue, against somebody else who is just stating that Marvel should have done this a long time ago. I think this makes sense for the core Spider-Man run right now because Zeb Wells has devoted so many issues to these character relationships. Amazing Spider-Man just did a storyline where they were involved with Limbo. Randy Robertson was involved in that story, and Randy Robertson is also involved in the gang war. And in previous storylines in Amazing Spider-Man, there's all these supporting cast moments with Randy too. If anybody else has any like additional commentary on that story, head into my chat. I want to hear it. In the meantime, we're going to head into our very first story here. This one is a big one that I actually just saw just a few moments ago. It feels like more and more artists over at Marvel and DC are starting to drop off these days. And it looks like the incredibly acclaimed Ultimate Comics artist Brian Hitch is also just headed over maybe to some creator-owned work. This one is coming in over from popverse.com. Marvel's Ultimates co-creator Brian Hitch is calling it quits on Marvel, DC, and anything that he doesn't own himself. Right now, Brian Hitch has just been doing phenomenal work reestablishing all these elements of the new Ultimate Universe with Jonathan Hickman. It is such a shame that we're actually not going to get, some additional artwork. It was such a thrill watching him, rejoin the line that he helped establish in such a strong visual component here. Let's check out what else Popverse has to say about this and also what the master Brian Hitch himself had to say here too. This one coming in over from Chris Arendt. Brian Hitch is one of the giants of modern superhero comics, with his work on Ultimates and the Authority inspiring the way we read and see superheroes. Not just in comics, but in the movies, TV shows, video games, and merch that they inspire. His early 2000s series Ultimates, with writer Mark Millar, helped define the Marvel brand as it became known through the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But now, he's leaving all that behind. In preparation for the brand new run of Ultimates, I actually went back and checked out some of those older Ultimate series from, Mark Millar and Brian Hitch. What I actually really found, like in my own independent research, is I feel like so much of what they did actually inspired the Marvel Cinematic Universe and the Avengers film in particular. Of course, like there's the reference over in the book that Nick Fury is set to become Samuel L. Jackson when they all, gather around and do this fan casting of who they would want to play themselves over in a movie. And of course, this moment is captured within the comic book, probably almost with the intention that maybe this could be adapted. And we've seen Mark Millar in so much of his work following Ultimates really right, I think, towards the screen and towards adaptations. Hitch, 53, has announced he will no longer be doing any project that he doesn't own at least a part of. This decision to move away from what's commonly known as work for hire or WFH in comics, is in advance of Hitch's new creator-owned series Redcoat, with writer Jeff Johns and inker Brad Anderson, scheduled to launch in spring 2024. I am so impressed with all the creative teams assembled over with the Ghost Machine property, over with Jeff Johns at Image Comics, Brad Anderson, such a talented creator. And yeah, if anybody else has checked out any of those comics, let me know over in the chat here. Let's see. Hitch's planned last work for hire project is the current 3-issue series Superman: The Last Days of Lex Luthor. Actually, that project, Superman: The Last Days of Lex Luthor, has such a strong fan component to it. I'm very happy that Hitch is going to sit down and really flesh out the rest of that series over with Mark Millar. I've also heard, some drama behind the scenes over with that storyline, as it seems like DC may have published that a little bit earlier than some of the creators wanted to. And I'm almost wondering if maybe this is some of the implication that involved Hitch leaving creator-owned comics over in the first place. Since Superman was the character who first sparked my passion for comics and movies, I can't think of anything more fitting than a truly Superman story as my last work for hire project. This would seemingly preclude Hitch continuing to be a concept artist on any movies or TV shows he does not own. He was a concept artist for the BBC's 2005 Doctor Who relaunch, as well as 2009 Star Trek movie directed by J.J. Abrams. Yeah, I just wanted to say this is actually really sad too, because Brian Hitch has been so prolific. I think these past couple years, particularly over at Marvel, I feel like the past couple years in particular, Marvel has really started to course correct in terms of their publishing line. I think Brian Hitch was always there at some of those pivotal moments. I'm remembering, some of those issues of Venom he drew that were so phenomenal, that were so spectacular. Some of those moments in Ultimate Invasion, I think, were like nothing short of breathtaking. Brian Hitch will absolutely be missed over at the Big Two. If he ever decides to come back, I will welcome him with open arms. There's something fantastic and amazing about the way he's able to pace comics in particular. All right, well, I want to send a big thank you over to Brian Hitch. Really curious at Redcoat and what the next stage of his career entails here. Let's go ahead and switch over to the Spider-Man universe. I don't always read the letters columns over in the back of Amazing Spider-Man, but lately there's been some really interesting commentary over from Marvel's editorial about the relationship over with Mary Jane and Peter Parker that so many Marvel fans are just so cross about. I want to go ahead and discuss this. I want to discuss my take, which I'm sure you've heard ad nauseum, about the relationship and disintegration over with Peter Parker and Mary Jane. Frankly, I think there are so many fans that are probably too invested in their relationship right now, and I think it's a really good idea for Marvel to kind of steer away from this. It seems like Marvel is really looking to keep Peter Parker as a younger man, as a younger character, and I think tying him down, associating with one character for years and years and years, and restoring the relationship to Mary Jane would really make the next creative team try and find a way to subvert that, to dissolute that, because you need to shift and move Peter Parker in different places. Let's go ahead and see what Marvel's editorial had to say about maybe reversing one more day or continuing the relationship with Peter and Mary. I'm also really interested to see if they kind of share some of my ideas or if the sentiment is shifting. Also, I know this is a super controversial topic. If anybody has anything to say, please go ahead, hop in chat. Marvel, and by the way, this one coming in from comicbook.com over from Cameron Bonamolo. Marvel won't undo Spider-Man one more day anytime soon, but never say never. Marvel's Spider editor addresses one of the most controversial storylines in Spider-Man history. Speak of the devil. One More Day is among the most divisive stories in the 60-year history of The Amazing Spider-Man, and one that is not likely to be undone anytime soon, according to Marvel's executive Spider-Man editor Nick Lowe. The 2007 storyline spanned Amazing Spider-Man 544, Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man 24, Sensational Spider-Man 41, and Amazing Spider-Man 545. In 2007, Marvel was getting just absolutely wild with the amount of Peter Parker led Spider-Man comics they were publishing apparently. Set in the aftermath of Marvel's Civil War crossover and Back in Black, it was a mythos-shaking status quo that relaunched the character for the brand new day era. A single Spidey who never married Mary Jane, his Aunt May alive, and well, his secret identity forgotten by the world. We have mostly moved on, and I wouldn't hold my breath for an undo anytime soon, Lowe wrote in response to a fan's question about one more day in the letter section of Amazing Spider Man number 39. But I'll never say never. To recap, after Spider Man unmasked in the support of the Superhero Registration Act, and Assassin's Bullet left his Aunt May on the brink of death, the demon Mephisto offered a desperate Spider Man a bargain. He would save Mary's life in exchange for Peter and MJ's marriage. Okay, so we have plenty to go ahead and comment on here. In response to some of what Nick Lowe is saying, I really think that my sentiment definitely sort of lines up with his. I feel like what a lot of Spider-Man, fans in particular lose track of is that the One More Day storyline was definitely a heavily felt, continuity-led editorial influence over on the state of the Spider-Man comics, but I think Brand New Day was a really strong era for the Spider-Man comic book with the rotating team of creators. Utilizing a younger Peter Parker and resetting some of his character relationships infused a lot more energy into the comic, and I think shifted Amazing Spider-Man into a much stronger direction. And while I really like the beginning over of the JMS run, it feels like JMS, even before One More Day, started to lose track of the Spider-Man property, and it really was that shift in tone and influence with the younger Peter Parker that I think really adjusted the Spider-Man property, and I think really helped utilize a younger Peter Parker in response to the current series, which I think still kind of operates under this aesthetic, utilizing several aspects of the Brand New Day storyline and a much younger Spider-Man here. Frankly, I'm glad to see that Marvel isn't looking to undo or reverse some of their decisions, because I think it would also impact the current Zeb Wells run really negatively. I feel like one of the touchstones for that book is the fact that Peter and Mary are just not together, and they're currently living their own lives, really analyzing things, under their own different contexts here. Let's go ahead and explore what's going on over with Mary Jane in terms of her own brand new series. This one is coming in over from Dave Richards over on CBR.com. Celeste Bronfman hits the jackpot with Mary Jane Watson. Celeste Bronfman unveils her plans for Mary Jane Watson, which includes Marvel's Gang War event and next year's Jackpot and Black Cat miniseries. Frankly, there's a lot to be excited about over with Mary Jane as the Jackpot character here. When Mary Jane first stepped into Peter Parker's life as a teenager, she had no idea she was taking the first step into a larger world of fantastic dangers and superheroics. Over the years, she's navigated that world pretty well as a confidant to heroes like Spider-Man. But now she's got superpowers of her own and is ready to walk down her heroic path as the hero known as Jackpot. Frankly, I'm really excited that Mary Jane is taking on this Jackpot identity now. Mary Jane is in a really interesting spot in terms of Spider-Man continuity. She's recently just lost her children that she actually had over in the Peter Parker, What Did Peter Do storyline. And Mary Jane has also recently gotten some superpowers. I think it's going to be really interesting watching her rise up over as a superhero in spite of all the adversity she's faced. Also, in the aftermath of the Hellfire Gala over in Amazing Spider-Man 31, we saw that Mary's aunt was impacted over from the sabotaged X-Men drugs. So it feels like Mary Jane is currently operating under an extremely dark status quo, really watching her rise up and utilize these brand new powers in her new costume, I think is going to be a ton of fun. Let's go ahead and see what Celeste Bronfman has in store over for Mary Jane in this brand new Jackpot comic book. Mary Jane takes her first big steps along that path in January's Jackpot one-shot by writer Celeste Bronfman and artist Joey Vasquez. where MJ will bring the random assortment of her jackpot technology and dose her with Two Bear against the super criminals of the gang war event. Then in March, MJ's journey continues in the Jackpot and Black Cat miniseries by Bronfman and Emilio Laiso. CBR spoke with Bronfman about both books, the heroes and villains MJ encounters, the recent tragedies her protagonist has endured, and the joys and challenges of petting a character whose power sets can vary wildly. Marvel also provided a look at some of Vasquez's art from the Jackpot one shot. I really like all these artists that are involved in these comic books. I think Emilio Laiso's art is fantastic at rendering like a slick and nimble line towards all these characters. Also, Joey Vasquez has these really kind of curvy images and lines that help evoke so much tension over in the story as well. Hey, good morning, Sahir. Really good to see you over in the stream here. It's been a rough year for Mary Jane Watson. She discovered that her children were not real, and her Aunt Anna is now in Ravencroft after the aftermath of the Hellfire Gala. How is she holding up when you pick up with her in the Jackpot one shot? Which aspects of her character are you interested in exploring in this story? I think one thing that really helps these characters, especially the supporting characters, seem a lot more interesting is when Marvel actually creates additional plot threads with them, utilizing like this idea that, Mary Jane's Aunt Anna is in like a psych ward over at Ravencroft, I think is just so harrowing. Plus, the idea of Mary Jane's like, forgotten children also just devastates her emotionally. Bronfman says, it's a blast. I think the unpredictability of her power suits her so well because Mary Jane is a chameleon in so many ways. She's been an actress, a model, and recently a brand ambassador. She adapts really quickly, and that's always been a huge strength of hers. So it's cool to see that skill highlighted through her tech. And it can sometimes be a challenge coming up with different power sets because I'm constantly trying to keep things fresh and interesting. Oftentimes, I'll find myself coming up with new powers through dreams or during conversations with friends, and I'll have to immediately write them down in a notes app. I try to keep a running list and bring it out whenever a new situation pops up and see what works best. Superheroes are more than just their powers, and as you mentioned, Mary Jane has lived an interesting life that I imagine has led to an interesting collection of skills. So, beyond her powers, what's your sense of Mary Jane's abilities as a crime fighter? Yeah, it's always interesting to see when Mary Jane is able to manifest some of her powers in the jackpot ability. It's always tough for her because she can never quite tell which power she's going to manifest because her powers are sort of based over on this roulette wheel. MJ is constantly diving into new jobs and hobbies, so she's able to figure out things as she goes. And I think that adaptability gives her a huge advantage when it comes to fighting, especially alongside a lineup of incredibly iconic and experienced superheroes. I would be intimidated, but she jumps in, which I really find admirable. Yeah, let's go ahead and see what sort of role Mary Jane is playing over in the Jackpot storyline. Gang War definitely heightens the stakes of the story. She's immediately thrown into the action and has to face off against Electro, which really tests her resolve in the face of immense fear. So having this story take place during Gang War is really cool. It also means there are quite a few exciting cameos for people to look out for. I'm really excited about that. Okay, we also have some interior art over for the upcoming Jackpot One Shot 2. Man, we actually have some pretty strong art for this book as well. Really solid page layouts, beautiful panel bleeds, and interiors. I'm definitely seeing that some of the anatomy over for Spider-Man on this image is definitely like a little bit too elongated. But overall here, I think there's a lot of ambition in terms of these pages. Also, it looks like Francine Fry is the Electro returning over to this Gang War issue of the Jackpot storyline over with Mary Jane as well here. I've also liked how during the Gang War, we've kind of really divided up the territory across New York. It was interesting to see in Amazing Spider-Man 39 how both the crime lord over and the crime master and ringmaster were both kind of fighting over the Upper East Side territory over in New York. Also, Spider Woman is currently trying to fight back against Diamondback, and we have the Jackpot going up over against Francine Fry Electro. Are there any other supporting players or guest stars in the one shot that you can reveal? The dynamic I'm really excited about spotlighting and can't wait for people to see is Jackpot and Spider Man. We haven't seen them fight side by side in costumes. It's really surreal. It kind of blew my mind when the art came in. There's also a moment where she gets to interact with She Hulk. I love She Hulk. I got a chance to work on the show for Marvel Studios for a bit, so it felt like a full circle moment for me. I was really excited about that. It's interesting to see how many of Marvel's creators that they work with also contribute to the writing on some of their television projects. I know that Zeb Wells was also slated as a writer over on the She Hulk show. What's it like working with Gang War First Strike artist Joey Vasquez on this one shot? Joey Vasquez has been an artist that I've been trying to pay a lot more attention to. I think there were so many beautiful pages in Amazing Spider Man Gang War First Strike over from Vasquez, too. Joey's incredible. He's done a really amazing job elevating the story. He's not only great at creating moments of levity through this intense, brutal, heart pounding action, but his work on Gang War First Strike meant he came in with an understanding of the landscape and was able to tie this one shot in seamlessly with all the action taking place around the city. That's true. Another really interesting part of Gang War is how all the territories are divided. I think it's fascinating how much of the geography of New York is referenced across these individual books. In fact, let's read a little bit about what Jackpot is going through over in Harlem. So Jackpot will catch up with a few heroes in Harlem, and most of the action will take place there, some at a few iconic locations I don't want to spoil. It was a little bit of a challenge seeing where everything was situated, but Nick Lowe and Caden McKagie helped with that. I was a little lost because I hadn't read all the scripts yet, but it's such a great crossover. I'm really excited for everyone to read it. All right, let's go ahead and talk about the next stage over with Jackpot and the Black Cat comic book over with Mary Jane as well. Your journey with Jackpot continues in March with the Jackpot and Black Cat miniseries by you and artist Emilio Laiso. You got the chance to bounce those characters off each other in a short story in Amazing Spider-Man 31, but how does it feel to get more space to explore their dynamic? What do you find most interesting about the friendship between Mary Jane and Felicia Hardy? Interestingly, this is like the second miniseries these characters have been in. The first one was set during the course of Dark Web, and Mary Jane got to learn that Black Cat was romantically involved with Spider-Man. Now, some of the continuity has shifted a little bit, and both of these characters are now sort of romantically detached over with Peter Parker. I think it's going to be interesting catching up with both Felicia and Mary in a post-Peter landscape here. I adore their friendship. I think they really admire each other, and it's because they have a lot in common. What I find so interesting is, even though they share many similar values, they come at situations with wildly different expectations and approaches. MJ is someone who loves working on teams and brainstorming with others, but Felicia is very much a lone wolf who is survived by keeping things close to the chest and putting herself first. You know what? I think I actually relate more with Black Cat. I am streaming alone. I feel like I always kind of do my own thing and, definitely associate better, I think, in more of an isolated context. I can work occasionally in more of a group setting, but we all know I work best when I'm kind of operating alone here. Let's see what Sahir says. Sahir says, when Jackpot first appeared after One More Day, I remember people originally thought that was MJ. I remember that too. That was kind of a fun storyline where they strung that along for a little bit. Also, so many people say so many negative things about that era of Spider-Man. But man, it was good. It was good. I feel like Zeb Wells coming back to Spider-Man is almost like a sequel to that era, especially because he brought in the character of Benjamin Rabin as well, the emissary, back into Spider-Man comics. Kind of crazy just to make her the character. Whatever happened to the original Jackpot? I have no idea. I'm not incredibly concerned here. What I hope and what I really want Marvel to do with both Black Cat and Mary Jane as Jackpot is I want them to just be a little bit more fleshed out as like individual characters. I would love if either Mary Jane or Black Cat could like really have their own successful, solo ongoing series where we could see like a supporting character in the Marvel universe really like take on, their own storylines here. Maybe, I'm not really sure if giving Mary Jane powers and setting her loose as the Jackpot character is ultimately the best idea for her, but I sure am interested in what kind of narrative that Celeste Bronfman and Emilio Laiso can really render with these characters. And I want to see, is there something about Mary Jane as a superhero that makes this storyline compelling? I want to know that. Let's see. Any final hints and teases you can leave us with about the story with Jackpot and Black Cat become embroiled in? We'll see a lot of old villains return and introduce a new love interest who complicates things for Felicia. You can expect lots of blackmail, heists, and many new Jackpot powers. Marvel's Jackpot Gang War tie-in is due out on January 17th, 2024. All right, so that is the upcoming storylines over with Mary Jane. I really think Marvel's doing a good job organizing all their plot threads together with her as a character. I really hope, as we mentioned earlier, that the idea of Mary Jane heading into her own over as the Jackpot character evokes a good story. But I think for now, we'll just have to go ahead and wait and see. Let's go ahead and shift things up in a massive way here over for our next storyline. I am a massive player of video games. I love video games across so many different contexts. Over this past week, we got to check out the Game Awards hosted by Jeff Keighley, and we learned about a brand new video game coming in from Arcane, starring none other than Blade. Let's go ahead and check this one out. I think you're going to be a lot more interested in this. Arcane's Blade game is a single-player immersive sim hybrid with all the S we love. This one coming in over from Hiron Cryer at Newsarama. The game director on Marvel's Blade can scarcely believe the new game is actually getting made, even if it is exactly the kind of mishmash that Arcane excels at. Yesterday, December 7th, Arcane unveiled Marvel's Blade game at the Game Awards 2023. Billed as in a massive third-person action game, immersive third-person action game. Now game director and Arcane Lion Studios director Dinga Bakaba has put out the two tweets below writing, "Somehow this fever dream happens. This is surreal." Bakaba is astounded that Arcane's Blade game in third person in our own crazy version of Paris is somehow happening. It's never been so excited for a project, and I'm not crying, you're crying, Bakaba writes. Bakaba's excitement is almost infectious at this point. Let's go ahead and back up a little bit and talk about what this is over in the first place. So, Blade is actually getting a game developed by Arcane. Arcane is an incredibly talented video game maker, having worked on video games like the Dishonored series. The fact that they're working on Blade was very exciting to me. But just to be totally transparent, just to be totally honest, the one thing kind of holding me back about this project in general, about playing it in the first place, was that usually Arcane makes like first-person games. However, when I was checking out the article and the trailer over for this game, I saw that this one is going to be a third-person action game. I'm going to be all in on this one. I feel like Arcane is such like a talented art house studio. I feel like in terms of Marvel's video games, they need to let really interesting developers, really interesting creators tackle these projects. I think in terms of Spider-Man 2, there are some things about it that I really like, but I wish that game kind of pushed the limit a little bit more on what a Spider-Man story can achieve. I am hoping that this game really pushes the Blade property over to the limit. The fact that the game is set in Paris, the fact that the developers over at Arcane are so passionate about it has me really, really excited. I really enjoyed playing all the sequences with Blade over in Marvel's Midnight Suns, and I hope that we'll get an even stronger aesthetic and impact over for Blade. There's so much potential in this. I think one of the things I really, really want to see over in this Blade game is the character of Bloodline. I love the Bloodline series that Marvel recently came out with. And I'm also really excited too, because in Marvel's main Avengers book, they're headed towards this massive Blood Hunt storyline where so many vampire killers are going to reunite over in the Marvel universe. I feel like this also could be a good way to advertise some of those characters in the lead up over to that event. I'm really happy that Marvel is just taking on Blade across so many different aspects and mediums. Marvel also has a current ongoing Blade series over from Brian Hill as well. All right, I want to go ahead and catch up with chat here. Let's see. The first few issues of Brand New Day were very good. This one is from Afro SF. It was a fresh, action-packed take with some amusing moments. I couldn't continue once the novelty wore off. I want the marriage back. I know a lot of people have this opinion. I know that I don't line up with a lot of the readers over on the main Spider-Man books. The only thing I would say though, and I'm really interested in starting this dialogue with anybody else who is also just as interested as me, I just don't see how, if you restore the relationship over with Peter Parker and Mary Jane, how it actually leads to stories. Especially because Marvel wants to keep Peter in like a very specific age. It seems like he's maybe between 20 and 40 in the books, and they do not want him to age past that. I just don't see like a scenario where introducing Mary Jane back into the books would create for like new story scenarios. Let's see here. Afro SF says, roll on Ultimate Spider-Man. Ultimate Spider-Man needs to show me why I care. And yeah, I know we've talked about that and just really came out with that opinion extensively. I am interested in Ultimate Spider-Man. I want my mind to be changed. I just need to see what Hickman and Chiquetto have in store there. So here, the only thing that scares me is it's coming from Bethesda. A Blade game will definitely be fun. Yeah, hopefully, I know that recent like Bethesda projects have been weird. I am hoping that Arcane is still a strong studio. I have some faith in the recent projects I played from them. I think Dishonored is just really, really lovely. I was actually speaking with a friend, and my friend said that the game I think made him a little bit nauseous. Hopefully that won't be an issue with this project because this project will be third person. Yeah, I'm really, really hyped about this one. I hope I really hope it pans out well. I never expected to see it over at the Game Awards, but it was a very, very welcome surprise here. I am actually so pumped about this next portion in the stream in particular. This portion, the rest of our stream today, is going to be totally centered around the X-Men. We have a slate of news stories that I think are wild. These last couple months of X-Men books in the very late stages of Krakoa are like nothing less than absolutely horrifying. We're going to start with a bit of a lighter story, but we're going to touch on some of the darkest material that you're going to see over in the Marvel Universe later on over in our stream. Let's go ahead and start by exploring Power Pack Into the Storm. This is a really, really cool comic book because it's utilizing these characters of the Power Pack and fleshing out some of their relationships over with the X-Men. For anybody not in the know, the Power Pack is loosely associated with the Fantastic Four. I'll catch you up on a little bit more context too when we read a little bit more about this news article coming in from George Marston at newsarama.com. The X-Men and Fantastic Four join the party in an early look at Power Pack Into the Storm. Flashback to early days of the Power Pack for the Kids Super Team's 40th anniversary. Marvel's Kids Super Team, the Power Pack, returns 40 years old in 2024, but original creators Louise Simonson and June Brigman are flashing back to the days of the team's youth in Power Pack Into the Storm, a 5-part limited series set in the team's original heyday when they were all just kids. I think it is so awesome that Louise Simonson and June Brigman are working over at Marvel again, reunited for this Power Pack storyline. Louise Simonson, in particular, is a really fascinating writer that has, I think, this more, let's see, what's the word I'm looking for? More of like a youthful aesthetic over to some of her books that I think are really influential to so many modern creators. I'm so happy that she's working in the Marvel Universe alongside June Brigman. It's not just the kids' superheroes of the Power Pack who are along for the trip back down memory lane. We've got a first look at some new interior pages which bring in the Fantastic Four as the Power Kids go on a summer vacation getaway. And we've also got an early look at two covers for Power Pack Into the Storm 3, a main cover by June Brigman, a variant by Todd Nowak, as well as the advanced solicit, which brings in guest star Storm of the X-Men to help the Power Pack deal with the Brood invasion. I have really been interested in some of Todd Nowak's artwork lately. I feel like Todd Nowak has leveled up over with some of the material on Stargirl The Lost Children. Can't wait to see what he brings to Power Pack Into the Storm. It is so hard for artists to draw younger characters, and I think this cover is just really, really mesmerizing. Looks like these are actually interior pages, and the level of detail across all these individual panels I think is staggering. The colors here are also quite beautiful as well. Some of the colors over on the individual characters' hair are just shades that are different in such minor and subtle ways over across the page here too. I also got a chance to take a peek over at some of the interior art for this issue before I came on stream, and I think the level of like aliens over in this issue are also quite mesmerizing too. I think the tone and with some of those really like nimble and like matter of fact aesthetics in the issue, readers really get a fascinating glimpse at some of the aesthetics in the book. Also, I think the perspective in this issue is interesting too. The fact that these turtle characters are so much smaller than these like massive towering horses just evokes so much more imagination for me as a reader here. Also, really cool seeing the Power Pack manifest their powers in terms of a dream over on the page. Really cool to see these silhouettes of the characters in the background too. We also have like a more classic aesthetic over with our Fantastic Four characters who are seemingly interacting with the Power Pack. Really gorgeous cover over on Power Pack Into the Storm, showcasing the Brood as well as Storm in the background too. And it looks like this is the Todd Nowak cover that we also previewed and heard a little bit about during this news article. And yes, I do think Todd Nowak's art is getting more detailed over in some of the more recent artwork I've seen for him. Really cool to see him render these more like period piece older costumes for the various characters over on the Power Pack Into the Storm cover. And I think also the way that he's able to render the expressions on younger characters is really, really beautiful too. So here says, I love the Power Pack back in the day, especially the team ups with Wolverine and the X-Men. Sahir, I love seeing them pop back up as young adults in Hickman's Fantastic Four. You know what, Sahir, we should talk about that because Future Foundation on Jonathan Hickman's Fantastic Four, that was one of like the best comic books that Marvel was publishing, period. The Future Foundation issues with Jonathan Hickman and Nick Dragotta were amazing. They were incredible. The characterization, the adventure backdrop, their relationship to the Fantastic Four, the facial expressions on the page, the way the book like intermixed with the main Fantastic Four series was absolutely amazing. That is a really, really good call out. I hope that Marvel also will continue to use some of these backup characters. I know that in the main Fantastic Four book, they have done a better job fleshing out the Future Foundation characters in like subsequent runs over to Jonathan Hickman as well to give them just a little bit more props to here. Afro SF, I loved when Franklin Richards was in the Power Pack. That was before my time, but also, you know, such a cool aspect of continuity as well. Celebrating 40 years of Power Pack, the Power Pack have been cornered by competing Snark and Brood agents, and their only hope for rescue is their old allies. Reads Marvel's official solicitation for Power Pack Into the Storm 3. But can Storm reach the siblings before they lose something or someone dear to them? The X-Men and Power Pack go all the way back to the Pack's roots in the early 80s, when they often wound up teaming up with adult heroes who would shepherd them through missions too dangerous for little kids to undertake alone. Power Pack Into the Storm goes on sale January 24, followed by 2 in February and 3 in March. Moving forward, I really want to see Marvel take on the Power Pack property and bring it back into sort of the modern day continuity. Frankly, I would love to see if Louise Simonson and June Brigman could just tell maybe an ongoing series, maybe a mini series, just bringing them back and really fleshing them out as characters again. I'd also love to see them work alongside what Ryan North is doing in the main Fantastic Four book, too. Sahir says Franklin should have become a permanent member. Yeah, I agree. I agree. I think, utilizing these Fantastic Four characters into Power Pack helps make the property, I think, just stronger in general. Marvel needs to come out with a new Power Pack comic book, I think, ASAP here. This is a property with just so much potential. All right, let's go ahead and touch on one of our biggest news stories of the day here. This one is actually a preview for the last issue of one of my favorite Marvel comics being published over on a monthly basis. Of course, it is none other than X-Men Red, just the science fiction based X-Men comic book that always pushes the subject matter to the limit. I have loved this series since the first issue debuted, especially thanks to the backdrop over with Sword in the Marvel Universe. Before we read a little bit about this, let's see what Cliff Woodbury has to say. Afro SF, yes, I was trying to talk, let's see here. Actually, Afro SF, the FF book by Matt Fraction and Mike Allred, that was also really, really phenomenal, really wonderful comic book. I absolutely can co-sign that one too. Cliff Woodbury, it's cool they are keeping Power Pack close to Fantastic Four because some of the best Fantastic Four comic panels are the ones that contain a family feeling within them. I think that's true. I think a lot of the Fantastic Four, like the best stories, do touch on that full aspect of those family relationships. Let's go ahead and head over to the final issue of X-Men Red. This one is pitting Storm against the character of Genesis to fight off the Genesis War. In the last issue of the series, we got to see Apocalypse, as well as some of the other characters over in X-Men Red, help power up Storm and mount an entire island to battle over against Genesis and her forces. Genesis right now is incredibly well powered up here. She's got the Staff of Annihilation. She's got the White Sword as well. I've already had the chance to preview some of the interior pages coming in from Yildiray Cinar. They are absolutely gorgeous. Without further ado, let's witness the final aspects of X-Men Red over in the 18th issue of the series. Final battle. Their armies have clashed and torn a world apart. Now, finally, the two war leaders meet. Storm versus Genesis for the fate of the Red Planet. As the planet itself fights alongside them, will planet Arakko survive, and more? Is the secret dream of En Sabah Nur about to come true? X-Men Red 18, written by Al Ewing, featuring art from Yildiray Cinar and Federico Blee, cover from Stefano Caselli and Jesus Abertov. Before we check out the interiors, I just wanted to quickly say here that in X-Men Red 18, I am very scared about the entire planet of Arakko falling to Orchis. It feels like Orchis is really trying to advance on so many pieces of the X-Men's territory, and over in Fall of X, it feels like the X-Men just keep getting, everything just beaten out of them over from Orchis. I know that Fall of the House of X is just on the horizon here, so we're only at the midway point for Fall of X. I feel like Arakko actually could fall in this issue. I'm incredibly scared to check this one out. All right, let's go ahead and dive in. The new island, Kadrak, fought with equal ferocity. It was new life, new growth, new change. It would not simply lie down and die. For deep within, inside Kadrak's secret heart, was he whose name was Revelation. This page is so beautiful, so well framed over from Sinar as we get to watch these two like competing planets, islands battling against each other. Also, the way that this circle is kind of powering up Storm in the background with all these X-Men adjacent characters like Apocalypse is so mesmerizing here. We also get a chance to preview Genesis and her upgraded power set on the next page as well, with her staff and the sword. Really seeing her fight off against Storm with all these vines stretched out over from the white sword, really mesmerizing too. Once again, we get to see the Annihilation commenting over on the miss over from Genesis in the background, just stating this really ominous one word of miss over in the background here. And there you go. That's it. That is our final panel here. Only 2 pages for the preview of X-Men Red 18. But frankly, I am still just so excited about this comic book that I wanted to go ahead and talk about it. Another aspect about this cover that I think is just so amazing is how it features so many of our X-Men Red cast members built up across the series. We get people like John Ironfire, we get people like the Fisher King, as well as Nova in the background too. Even if Arakko falls, I'm really hoping that in the next stages of Fall of X, or even in the next incarnation of X-Men, we're going to be taking all these characters with us and featuring a really different and interesting new status quo over for Storm. Sahir says, I am personally over the extinction stories, so I dropped a lot of X books. The downfall started with X deaths, Lives of Wolverine crap. You know what, Sahir? I actually appreciate you commenting on this, but right now, I think the battle between the Orcus and X-Men is so epic right now. I think the one thing helping me like stay interested in these books as they develop over time is the fact that Jonathan Hickman's X-Men run started establishing the threat of Orcus over with those dual miniseries back in the day. So it feels like this was always destined to happen, and now we're watching it like play out in all these different contexts and all these different books right in front of our very eyes. Let's head into our next X-Men story. This is Dark X-Men issue 5. This one is also going to be so much fun here. We previewed this a little bit earlier on our stream, but one of the last remaining pieces of X-Men continuity right now is the Limbo Embassy over in New York. And of course, Orcus doesn't like the idea of the Limbo Embassy. They've been scheming to take Madeline Pryor and her team of Dark X-Men down. Since the very first issue of Dark X-Men, we got to see the Orcus agents Krull and Valens scheme against the Dark X-Men, and they've really done quite a lot of damage too. They've taken out people like Archangel, and they did this really weird, insane fusion between Zero and Albert over in the comic book. They've also had this like twisted and evil version of Madeline Pryor. And in the last issue of Dark X-Men, together they went ahead and mounted a massive battle over on the Limbo Embassy here. They went ahead and tricked the Dark X-Men into falling into this like alternate reality. And then in the meantime, they went ahead and just really ransacked and just destroyed like all those other mutants in the embassy. Let's go ahead and see if Madeline Pryor and her team of Dark X-Men are able to fight back against Krull, Valens, this twisted version of Madeline Pryor, and Orcus in Dark X-Men issue 5. Inferno. The Limbo Embassy falls as Orcus's secret weapon against Madeline Pryor ascends to the throne. When the flames die down, who will become the one true Goblin Queen, and will any of the Dark X-Men survive the outcome? I have loved Steve Folks and Jonas Scharf's approach over to Dark X-Men since the first issue. The way that all these individual issues have kicked off over with some narration has been mesmerizing. Let's go ahead and check in on the newer character of Faint, formerly known as a Gimmick here. Carmen Cruz wanted nothing more than to be a part of the X-Men. One day she walked through a magic portal to a living island where she and all of her favorite heroes could never die. It felt too good to be true. Carmen's dreams shattered the night of the Hellfire Gala, and she awoke to find herself in the company of a very different sort of X-Men. Death feels much closer at hand now, though there are still heroes to be found amidst the darkness. I have loved how Jonas Scharf has been able to render so much shading across the different characters in terms of the art here. It feels like there's so much detail on like each of the character expressions across the issue. Also, the way that Scharf is able to depict some of the expressions for the Dark X-Men makes them look really harrowing, especially with Zero and Albert here over on this page. I love how Jonas Scharf is sort of building the tension between Maddie and her doppelganger as well. And on the next page here, we get to see Maddie and some of the rest of the Dark X-Men fight back against the Banff dragons that Orcus has also engineered in a recent storyline too. Maddie says, "Leave no one standing, my X-Men." Also, I think it's interesting that we get to see Madeline and some of these other Dark X-Men working a little bit closer together as a group within the context of this storyline here. Let's see what this doppelganger of Madeline has to say on this next page. "I outgrew them, and it caused these fools to let their guard down. I've spent my entire life in one limbo after another, enough time to master arcane arts you can hardly conceive. Although I'm impressed with the toy you've created." Steve Folks has done an excellent job depicting the backstory of this alternate version of Madeline Pryor in recent X-Men issues too. It's been really interesting to see how mainly like the entire Dark X-Men comic book has been building up to this one particular issue where Krull and Valance essentially invade the embassy here. And the fact that Steve Folks even managed to render the backstory of the doppelganger version of Madeline Pryor, I think are just some of the aspects that got me this excited for the confrontation in the first place. This is our last page here. This page is just so intriguing as we get to see Madeline calling out the fact that the doppelganger Maddie is doing something with the Mercy Crown, which is really the Dark X-Men version of Cerebro that finds the souls of the various X-Men characters. Madeline says the Mercy Crown is not a weapon, it's a tool of rescue, so that I might save mutant kind. And that's really been one of the other pieces over in Dark X-Men, is that Maddie has been trying to assemble as many mutants as she can, utilizing this gadget over with the Mercy Crown. Doppelganger Maddie says, "It can touch any mutant soul on Earth, perhaps even beyond. I don't need to look inside your mind to know why you made something like this. If and when Orcus fails, Scott Summers and all the other good little mutants will need new threats to keep them busy. You made the Mercy Crown so that when the X-Men inevitably turn on you once more, you'll be ready to snuff them out." I think this panel in particular is so interesting. This doppelganger version of Maddie is trying to push on some of the animosity that Madeline feels towards the X-Men. I mean, let's face it, Madeline just recently staged an assault against the X-Men during Dark Web, so it feels like her morality may not be over on the up and up in full here. I think the way that this doppelganger Maddie is kind of pulling on her animosity with the X-Men, it even pulls on a different aspect of Dark X-Men than what we've seen recently. There's so many reasons to be excited about this comic book series. We're going to have a full review this Wednesday, and we're going to see if these like ancillary pieces of X-Men, mutant real estate like the Limbo Embassy and the planet of Arakko are going to be left standing here. I'm really wondering if both of these territories are going to fall, and if Fall of the House of X is going to feel even more dire than what you would even anticipate here. All right, I'm going to go ahead and take a quick break, and then we're going to head back into some of our next X-Men news stories. Once again here, this is the most exciting part of our stream. We have so much interesting stuff to head into in just a few moments. Please go ahead and stick with us. Okay, hello, 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 and welcome back. Welcome back. Let's go ahead and get into, I think, is probably our most exciting news story of the day here. We have some brand new X Men issues that are set to come out over in March. Let's go ahead and see what the fall of the House of X has in store for some upcoming X Men series. This one is coming in over from Marvel.com. Let's see here. The fall of the House of X is upon us. Check out the covers and story descriptions for X Men issues coming this March is part of the Krakoan era's finale. In Jonathan Hickman's House of X and Powers of 10, the dawn of Krakoa ushered in a revolutionary period of X Men comic book storytelling. Now the Krakoan age comes crashing down, and the group of X creators are making sure it goes out on a high note. Two interconnected series, Jerry Duggan and Lucas Wernick's Fall of the House of X and Kieran Gillen and R.B. Silva's Rise of the Powers of 10 will close out the era. The mythos-shattering events of these twin sagas will bleed out into special limited series, including Cable, Dead X-Men, Resurrection of Magneto, and X-Men Forever. In addition, current X-Men ongoing titles, Wolverine, X-Force, and X-Men, will also deal with the dramatic repercussions of Krakoa's fall with the culmination of nearly 5 years' worth of intricate plotting and redefining character arcs. You know what? This last paragraph that we just read out is actually incredibly important. This is really what the final wave of the Krakoan X-Men books are going to look like over at Marvel. We're going to get some brand new issues of Wolverine, X-Force, and X-Men. We're going to get Resurrection of Magneto, X-Men Forever, Cable, Dead X-Men, and of course the dual miniseries, The Fall of House of X and Rise of Powers of 10. So I think it's just fascinating to see which Marvel comics are ending in the next couple weeks and which are staying around to sunset the Krakoa nature of Marvel here. Definitely sad to see that books like Immortal X-Men and X-Men Red do seem to be winding down within the next couple months, but I do think that these final comic book series of issues like X-Men, X-Force, and Wolverine are all so interesting. Today, fans can learn about the various X-Men issues hitting stands in March. It's the peak of the fall of the House of X, and the final war of Krakoa is fought on multiple fronts throughout time and space. Harsh defeats and inspiring victories await as Nathan Summers teams up with his younger self to take down the threat of the Neocracy. Betsy Braddock assists a group of fallen X-Men on their desperate mission in Dead X-Men, and Storm and Magneto face off against an iconic villain in the afterlife of Resurrection of Magneto. Plus, the Phoenix Force's role in Mutantkind's future is revealed in X-Men Forever, and one of the best friend duos in the Marvel Universe reunite for some good old-fashioned vengeance in X-Men 32. In March, Wolverine and Sabretooth continue their bloodiest and most momentous showdown ever in new installments of the Sabretooth War, and Beast finally gets what's coming to him as X-Force relaunches its milestone 50th issue. All right, let's go ahead and talk a little bit about X-Men 32 here. X-Men 32, I think, is really going to be a fantastic comic book series. Looks like this one is looking to flesh out the relationship over between Magic and Shadowcat in the wake of the fall of the House of X branding that's also featured on several of these covers. I am head over heels for this X-Men run so far, written by Jerry Duggan. It looks like this issue is set to feature some art coming in from Phil Noto as opposed to usual interior artist Joshua Cassara. Cassara has rendered the cover on X-Men 32. And we also get to see a little cutout of Lockjaw as a circle in the bottom left cover. Also think it's a little bit mesmerizing how some of these like Orcus suits have that like red hue as well, with all this really interesting gadgetry over on these costumes too. Besties with bloody blades. Kitty Pryde and Ilyana Rasputin have been friends for a long time. They've had good times and They've had bad times. One thing they can always agree on: stomping anti mutant bigots' heads. Yeah, X Men over from Jerry Duggan has been a tremendous delight here. The way that Jerry Duggan has just switched some of his story components issue after issue has made X Men feel so fresh as a comic book series. At one point, this book was exploring Firestar going undercover over at Orcus. The next issue, this comic book is taking a look at Doom and the X Men. And it looks like in an upcoming storyline, we're going to get to see Ilyana and Shadowcat really define their relationship in the Fall of the House of X era. Dead X-Men 3. This one is news to me because I didn't know this was going to be the next destination for Betsy Braddock. I am frankly really excited for this one because it features writing from Steve Folks. Of course, I am so excited about Marvel's current Spider-Woman and Dark X-Men series, both written by him right now. Very interested to see what Dead X-Men has in store. I feel like this book is also set to line up with one of the twin X-Men comics. I can't remember which one right off the top of my head here. Far, far away, Rachel Summers recruited the Dead X-Men for a seemingly impossible mission. And now they're about to discover the real reason behind their task. As the walls of reality start to bend, will anyone survive the revelation? Frankly, another big reason to be excited about this one is the fact that all these dead X-Men who were very unceremoniously killed at the Hellfire Gala are now coming back and operating here as a team. Some of these characters are really important, as we have individuals like Sam Guthrie as well as Jubilee here too. Dead X-Men is a 4-issue miniseries. This is the 3rd chapter, written by Steve Folks, featuring art from just a wide roster of creators here. We have Lin Yoshi, Bernard Chang, Javier Pina, and David Baldeon. Let's head into Wolverine 45. This one written by Victor Laval and Benjamin Percy, featuring art by Jeff Shaw and a cover by Lionel Francis Yu. X marks the spot. The treasure hunt is on as Sabretooth picks up on the trail of an item that will turn the tide of war on Wolverine. But as the best there is regroups with the remnants of his allies, it'll be a race against time for the good guys to uncover a lost weapon that could prove to be their last hope. And that's if Orcus and the Stark Sentinels don't get them first. To me, it almost feels like Wolverine is a little bit detached from the Fall of X status quo in this fight over with Sabretooth. Bringing in some Stark Sentinels right now is a really good idea. I'm interested to see if Orcus has any additional capacity operating in this storyline. Also, I am just so thrilled to see Victor Laval return to Sabretooth over at Marvel 2. Definitely have my eye on this one as it shakes out, as I'm not always really kind of tuned into and plugged into Marvel's main Wolverine comic book here. Also, we have a really fantastic creative team on this one. Jeff Shaw's art is just beautiful. I'm such a massive fan of Lionel Yu's covers. I feel like Lionel Yu is getting really adventurous in these last couple covers over in this big Sabretooth War storyline too. Now, I am really mesmerized by this upcoming cover for Resurrection of Magneto, once again featuring the Fall of the House of X branding and featuring just amazing expressions for this monster, as well as Magneto himself coming in from Stefano Caselli. This one looks to be our replacement over for X-Men Red during the Fall of the House of X era over at Marvel. Resurrection of Magneto issue 3, written by Al Ewing, featuring art by Luciano Vecchio. We got the opportunity to preview some of those interior pages on a recent stream. I am frankly so excited about this one. I really think it's going to feel like some of the epic, like science fiction aspect of the X-Men Red series, but I also think it's going to feature some of those horror elements from these late stage Krakoa comic books. Falls the shadow. In the cold, dark rooms beyond death, there are terrible things. Annihilators, adversaries, and a king of shadows who seeks a new soul to live in. The time of easy miracles is over. For Storm and Magneto, all the roads back to life are hard, and this is the hardest road of all. I feel like we've said this repeatedly, but the thing I think I am most excited about in terms of Resurrection of Magneto is really watching Eric maybe find a reason to live again. It feels like throughout the pages of X Men Red, Magneto slowly lost his will to come back and even serve alongside the X Men. So I'm just really, really fascinated to see if there's going to be any element that's going to make Magneto realize just how precious and important life is again. One of the books I am most anticipating is the replacement, seemingly for Immortal X Men, X Men Forever. This one also a four-issue series over at Marvel, and it's written by, I think, one of the strongest creators across the entire line, Kieran Gillen. This one featuring art from Luca Maresca and a cover by Mark Brooks. Haunted House of X. How can you kill a digital god? What do you do when the Phoenix is bleeding out into nothing? There's been questions that have haunted you since the end of Immortal X-Men, finally some answers. There's also been some questions that have haunted you since the start of Immortal X-Men, finally some answers too, tying directly into the pages of the epic Fall of the House of X and Rise of the Powers of 10 comes the story of Revelation. So I wanted to say, in terms of what Kieran Gillen and X-Men Forever have brought over to Marvel and just the greater universe over the past couple years, it feels to me like Kieran Gillen is one of the strongest X-Men creators across the line. Kieran Gillen, I feel like, has such a strong track record over in terms of comics, and I think Immortal X-Men has been one of the books that have really helped strengthen and flesh out the Krakoa line of titles in the absence of Jonathan Hickman. And we can even extend into comic books from Kieran Gillen beyond X-Men Forever with works like Young Avengers and Iron Man. The more time that goes on, the more I just really start to appreciate Kieran Gillen's Big Two work in all these different contexts. So here it says, if Krakoa burns, be prepared for Magneto to become a ruthless villain again. I'm hoping this new era surprises us. Man, so here, I'd be really interested to see if Magneto would become a villain again. I feel like there are so many years of X-Men continuity now that have sort of fleshed him out as a hero, and it would be so difficult for Marvel to tell a really engaging story that would be able to, capture a new story scenario over with Magneto as a villain. But we'll just have to wait and see how that one shakes out here. Let's go ahead and take a look at the next issue of Cable. This is chapter 3 of the 4-issue miniseries written over from Fabian Nicieza, featuring art from Scott Eaton and a cover by Will Portacio. I think it's so interesting that in the end of Krakoa, Marvel is once again utilizing these two versions of Cable here. Protect the future no matter the cost. Cable and his younger counterpart Nate are closer than ever to uncovering the origins of the Neocracy and putting an end to a bloody future before it can come to pass. But each step closer also brings them further into the crosshairs of the mysterious Parvenu. With the walls closing in, there's no one else they can trust. But with the weight of the world on their shoulders, will Cable and Nate be able to bear the burden together, or will they crumble under the weight? So Cable issue 3 written over from Fabian Nicieza, featuring art by Scott Eaton and a cover by Will Portacio. Once again here, I think the creative team on this book is super cool. So happy that Marvel, once again, working with all these different legacy creators. Lionel Francis Yu's cover on Wolverine 46, I think, is one of the most harrowing pieces of artwork we've gotten yet over for this series of covers on the Sabretooth War. Issue 46, once again, written by Percy and Laval. This one is cover from Corey Smith. This one is art from Corey Smith, and as we mentioned already, a cover from Yu. Brain Changer, Game Changer. Wolverine's memory has been altered, erased, restored, forgotten, and destroyed. This time, if he can't get his head on straight, Sabretooth will do far worse than that. The most diabolical chapter of the Sabretooth War yet. And you thought those early issues were violent. Yeah, I know we talked a little bit about the X Deaths and Lives of Wolverine crossover over across the Wolverine comic books. I actually enjoyed that one and how it sort of fleshed out Moira and the world of Wolverine. I'm interested to see if Wolverine is going to be able to support this really long story pitting Wolverine against Sabretooth, which I think we've just seen endless times over in the Marvel Universe. I think this is one of the best covers we've gotten from Lionel Yu so far. And once again, here, I think there's a lot of promise in this storyline. I'm just curious to see if they can really keep a epic long form storyline together as the next issues of Wolverine head into comic book stores here. X-Force issue 50. This has been one of the longest running Krakoa X-Men comics. Really excited to see this series hit such a massive milestone here. This one also written by Benjamin Percy, featuring artwork from Robert Gill and a cover from Daniel Acuna. The final battle against Beast in the landmark 50th issue. X-Force confronts Beast with their secret weapon of final reckoning. Not a dry eye in the house. Target Beast finale. I think X-Force has done a tremendous job really showing all these interesting character dynamics over for Beast as a hero. We've really gotten to see Beast commit just so many war crimes across X-Force and tap into this fascinating piece over with his continuity. In fact, we even have a teaser at an upcoming issue of X-Force that we also should explore here. This one is coming in over from David Brooke at Adventures in Poor Taste. It's Beast vs. Beast in new X-Force 48 teaser. Beast has finally gone too far, and X-Force enacts a radical plan to take him down next month in X-Force 48. Marvel Comics has released a new teaser for X-Force, prominently featuring Beasts, possibly two of them. Written by Ben Percy and featuring art by Robert Gill, the teaser promises a long-awaited evolution for the original X-Men icon. This is the same Beast that Adventures in Poor Taste wrote about back in 2020 in the article, Beast is Still Awful, the othering of plant people in X-Force 6. Beast has finally gone too far, and X-Force enacts a radical plan to take him down in next month's X-Men 48. Don't miss the long-awaited evolution for an original X-Men icon as writer Benjamin Percy and Robert Gill set the stage for X-Force's milestone 50th issue. So here is the official teaser on X-Force 48, teasing that the best way to stop Beast is, well, it seems like it's Beast, actually. In some recent X-Men and Wolverine issues, watching the animosity between Wolverine and Beast really kind of flare up, with Beast trying to utilize some clones over of Wolverine and pit them against Logan has been absolutely terrifying. There's been so much really strong characterization for this villainous Beast across the X-Men line of Krakoa comics. Very happy that in the final stages of X-Force and towards the end of Krakoa, we're finally going to get to see this big storyline that the comic book has built up over years and years of storytelling. Really hoping that X-Force is able to nail the landing in their final pieces of continuity between Wolverine and Beast here. Let's get one more look over at that beautiful Daniel Acuna cover on X-Force 50. I've loved Daniel Acuna's work for such a long time, even extending to other publishers like DC Comics. The duo of these two Wolverine characters are so cool. Love how characters like Domino are featured, as well as Colossus, who's had such a big impact on recent X-Force issues in general here. I've got some high expectations on X-Force 50 and really hoping that Percy and Gill deliver on this monumental chapter. I have good news for you, because our storylines involving these X-Men comics are still going here. Let's go ahead and check out some brand new covers over from Fall of the House of X and Rise of the Powers of 10 issue 3. This one also coming in over from Marvel Comics. The X-Men gain the upper hand against Orcus in Fall of the House of X and Rise of the Powers of 10-3. Check out the covers and learn about March's installments of Fall of the House of X and Rise of the Powers of 10, the two series that will serve as the conclusion of the X-Men's Krakoan era. Due to the sinister machinations of the anti-mutant supervillain group Orcus, mutant kind has fallen harder than ever before. But soon the X-Men will have their revenge as the revolutionary Krakoan age comes to an explosive end. So I just want to say, in response to the X-Men really operating in the background of Orcus and trying to function together as a team, I've loved how desperate that Orcus has made the X-Men over the past couple months at Marvel, and I also think it's made the last couple issues of Krakoa feel even more horror-based than we've ever seen the publisher head into before here. Just as Jonathan Hickman boldly kicked it off in 2019 in twin series House of X and Powers of 10, the finale of the Krakoan Age will be told across two intertwined series starting in January, Fall of the House of X and Rise of the Powers of 10. The two 5-issue limited series will deliver a breathtaking saga across mutant history and the future of the X-Men today and tomorrow wage the final war against extinction and across their entire existence. Kieran Gillen and Lucas Wernick's Follow the House of X sees a classic lineup of X-Men embark on a daring mission to bring down Orcus for good and restore hope to mutant kind. Meanwhile, Kieran Gillen and R.B. Silva's Rise of the Powers of 10 takes readers on a senses-shattering journey beyond space and time as an ambitious plan is put into action to prevent the darkest of futures from coming to pass. It's a who's who of current mutant kind mastermind storytellers, and they're holding nothing back as they close out Krakoa down in epic style and position the X-Men for their all-new era launching later next year. Today, fans can peek ahead at the covers for Follow the House of X3 and Rise of the Powers of 10-3, both arriving in March. This cover is so amazing. I love the fact that it references the Dr. Stasis reveal over in X-Men. That was such a magical time where we first previewed the massive Sins of Sinister story and really got to see like how Orcus was functioning over in the meantime. I think creators like Jerry Duggan and Kieran Gillen did a great job like working together to build up to this reveal. And I think this was such a pivotal time, like in the post Jonathan Hickman era of X-Men, that's led to so many fantastic comics. I was doing a little bit of research in terms of Dr. Stasis, and I'm also just so interested and mesmerized by the fact that all this continuity with this Dr. Stasis character is so recent in terms of Marvel too. I think this is just such a fantastic way to homage such an excellent moment over in Marvel Comics during the Krakoan era. All right, let's go ahead and catch up over with some of our chat messages. Arakko, do you think Beast is a villain? Let's see here. And this one coming in from Cliff Woodbury. Do you think Beast is a villain amongst heroes or someone who doesn't think his actions through and isn't a villain nor his villainous intentions in his failings? I only ask because a lot of this mess ups could be chalked up to both, depending on how you look at them, but happens so often you have to question his motives as they compromise the X-Men too often. You know what, Cliff? I don't want to say you answered your question in terms of your message, but I almost think you did. You know, it does seem like maybe Beast doesn't have the worst intentions, but makes all of these like bad decisions continually again and again across the series, and it does end up putting him in this situation. I think one of the most interesting pieces in Beast continuity is the fact that he actually brought the time-displaced X-Men over into the fold during the Brian Michael Bendis X-Men era, so you can trace back some of the weird moves that he makes back years in terms of Marvel's current storytelling. But I just think the rash decision-making that he utilizes really ends up putting the X-Men in some compromised positions, just exactly as you've written, over in these comments here. Follow the House of X is a 5-issue miniseries. Chapter 3 is on sale March 13th, written by Jerry Duggan, featuring art from Lucas Wernick. Of course, the cover And by the way, we haven't mentioned that this is a really tremendous cover from Pepe Larraz, featuring the reflection of Wolverine in the background of this helmet, too. In the fall of the House of X3, the end is truly begun. The X-Men have taken all they're willing to take from Orcus. Now it's time for them to do the dishing out. Unfortunately, just when it seems like one threat is over, another rises to take its place. The final battle of the Krakoan Age rages as two series that are meant as two series that are one move toward a crash that will echo across the universe. All right, let's go ahead and explore Rise of the Powers of 10, issue 3. This is the comic book series over from Kieran Gillen and R.B. Silva. This one is really fascinating because it features a brand new look over at Moira in the Marvel Universe. Of course, Moira in the House of X series was just instrumental in launching the Krakoan Age of X-Men comics, so it does feel like the publisher is headed full circle and featuring Moira in yet another cover here. I think it's really tremendous how we get this alternate version of continuity playing out with this mysterious character pointing a gun towards Moira, and we get to see Moira's really exaggerated reaction over on the page. I just wanted to say in response here, there's something about the way that Moira's head is positioned over on the page that's a little bit silly here, and I'm not the biggest fan in terms of this cover. I think the purple hues over on the gun pointed towards Moira is really, really beautiful, and I also like how surprised Moira is by the appearance of the gun in general. I like the story implications and the fact that the X-Men is going full circle, but I do think that the facial expression is just a little bit odd. In Rise of the Powers of 10-3, discover that the real end is never beginning. The past, present, and future of all Krakoa rests in a trigger finger. This scenario you prayed would never happen plays out as two series that are one move toward a crash that will reverberate outside the universe. Rise of the Powers of 10-3 is written from Kieran Gillen with art over from R.B. Silva. As we mentioned up top here, Kieran Gillen's writing in terms of Marvel, I think, has really helped the X-Men feel more streamlined. The way that Gillen just opened up plot threads for Sins of Sinister and widened the relationship between Mystique and Destiny in the core Immortal X-Men series has really enriched the line for the better. I'm just really amazed at the past couple years of Kieran Gillen's work over at Marvel Comics. I am just so tremendously excited that the publisher is tapping both Duggan and Gillen over for these Fall of the House of X and Rise of the Powers of 10 series, and I really hope that the publisher manages to capture the full potential of what these titles have in store here. Yeah, it also feels like we're headed into the final stages of the Krakoan era too, so lots of material to be interested in. Our fun with the X-Men slate of characters is still going here. Let's check out what Al Ewing has in store over for the Resurrection of Magneto. This article coming in from comicbook.com, written by Timothy Adams. Storm is about to embark on a journey to the afterlife to bring the X-Men's longtime friend and nemesis Magneto back to life. The Master of Magnetism gave his life to defend Arakko from invading forces in the Marvel event Judgment Day, while the X-Men conquered death with the resurrection protocols. Magneto was one of the first mutants to cut himself off from the pipeline, meaning his death was supposed to be permanent. Of course, with this being comic books, no one can ever count out a dead hero, especially one of the X-Men. Comicbook.com spoke to writer Al Ewing about Resurrection of Magneto to find out what plans he has for both Magneto and Storm. Ewing discussed the signature superhero trope of life and death, how the X-Men books have dealt with death during the highs and lows of the Krakoan era. Working with artist Luciano Vecchio on Resurrection of Magneto and his thoughts on winding down with his time in the X-Office. Along with the first look of Resurrection of Magneto 1, comicbook.com can also reveal the cover and solicitation for Resurrection of Magneto 3. Really tremendous, really outstanding cover here. Let's go ahead and see what Al Ewing has to say. We got the chance over on our previous stream to take a look at some of these preview pages where Storm is reconnecting with Dr. Craig Marshall here. Really taken with how Luciano Vecchio is able to really arrange a page too. It's fitting that the X-Men's Krakoan era ends with Magneto's return. With mutants scattered across the globe and the mutant resurrection circuit offline, what kind of journey must Storm embark on to bring Magneto back to life? Al Ewing says, there's a trope in the superhero genre called the revolving door of death. But 9 times out of 10, when a superhero comes back from the dead, it's because of some twist of plot they never died in the first place. Because bringing someone back from death is a very big deal. Now, recently in the X books, we've been asking what would happen if death was no big deal and something mutant kind could shrug off as easily as a cold, and that question would lead to some interesting answers. How would a society that has conquered death change? How would it not change? On Krakoa, we found out, as a result of that, maybe a few readers got a little complacent with the idea of their heroes dying. That was kind of the intention, to defang those big, shock death stories and make it so we couldn't rely on that anymore. Magneto was an exception, because he had a really great death that we stated ahead of time would not be undone easily, and so it's come to pass. Death is back, death is once more insurmountable, and it's once more a very big deal. We've not set up any of these plot twists that mean Magneto never actually died. We've left ourselves no wriggle room here, as this was always the plan. So how does Storm bring him back? With great difficulty, and with the classic hero's journey into the underworld, and with judicious use of an ingredient Jonathan left in the pantry. But mostly the first one. She's going to be seeing more of the architecture of reality in the Marvel Universe, and that's just for starters. This quest takes her and Max deep into the hearts of X lore. I really like how Magneto is really talking up, I really like how Al Ewing is really hyping up this comic book series. I also appreciate how he seems to understand that readers are a little bit upset and flustered about the fact that Magneto is coming back so soon to the Marvel Universe after he went out in such a blaze of glory over in the current X-Men Red series. I can see Magneto being very content with his death back during Judgment Day and not looking forward to rejoining the fight to save mutant kind. How has the afterlife been treating Magneto? And, as one of Krakoa's founders, can you describe his thoughts and feelings on its fall from grace without him? I am so thrilled to see the interviewer ask Al Ewing about how Magneto really finds his will to live again amongst the Resurrection of Magneto comic book. Let's go ahead and see what Ewing has to say about the mental state of Magneto. We get to see exactly how the afterlife is treating Magneto, and we get to see how he feels about his life, and we get to see his reaction about hearing about the ongoing fall of X. All of this will be on the page, so I don't really want to get into it here. But I will say that Magneto is currently in a sphere of judgment and will have to reckon with all of his sins, both great and subtle. And with the darker side of his nature, nobody wants to see a comic book where Magneto takes a number and waits in a queue. We want his rebirth to be as big of a deal, as great of a personal sacrifice as his death. Will we achieve that? I think we're on course. Let's see here. So Cliff Woodbury says Hickman is still directly affecting Marvel stories. Yeah, Hickman is still affecting Marvel stories, but with Hickman working alongside the Ultimate Universe and with some of these other works amid the Marvel line, it feels like he's actually pretty disconnected from what's going on with the X-Men slate of books right now. This is incredibly sad for me. I think Al Ewing has just done tremendous work with the X-Men, month after month after month across several different comics, in addition to X-Men Red with books like Sword. Let's see what he has to say about leaving the X-Men office. Al Ewing says, well, a big highlight is finally getting to work with Luciano Vecchio. I've been a big of his fan as his art since I first saw it. It's got that great, clean, clear line that I always love. It's got this amazing sensuality to it, this high emotional content that really helps gets the big beats over. He can do giant power flexes like nobody's business, and the cherry on top is that he knows his turret, which is a huge asset in a story like this that draws and plays on a lot of magical stuff. As to where Magneto goes from here, well, I can't really speak to that. This is my personal swan song of X, but I will say that we leave him in a very good and fascinating place. I love what Al Ewing said about Luciano Vecchio's art. I think Vecchio is so creative in terms of the page layouts. The line is so clear, just like Ewing mentioned, and there's just so much ambition present over within the page itself. I would never guess how Vecchio would render, some of the layouts just judging from the script alone, but that sense of storytelling always seems to capture my interest on the page. I'm literally sad. I thought this article was like 2 times as long, but we just got directly to the end of it. Wow, I think Marvel is really cooking up some good stuff here in the final couple issues over with X-Men. And I'm very excited that Al Ewing's, final project over with the X-Men characters is a coda over to all the fantastic work he's built upon over with Magneto, especially during books like Judgment Day and X-Men Red. I think Al Ewing should be nothing more than just overjoyed by all his contributions over to the X-Men books. I think alongside people like Jerry Duggan and Karen Gillan and Cy Spurrier, these creators have done a tremendous job working alongside each other and like weaving all these plot threads within these books. I would really love like all four of these creators to work together on like a different Marvel property, whether it be the Avengers or a different book. I think there is something so magical here about these final couple months over in Krakoa, and I'm so happy to be checking these books out with you. Why don't we go ahead and close out our stream today by hearing Benjamin Percy and Victor Laval talk directly about Wolverine and Sabretooth's massive war over in their books that we've teased. This one coming in from Chris Hassan over at adventuresinpoortaste.com. Welcome, X fans, to another uncanny edition of X-Men Monday. You can't wrap the Krakoan era without at least one bloody brawl between arch rivals Wolverine and Sabretooth. Fortunately, Logan's writer Ben Percy and Victor's writer Victor Laval have you covered, X-fans. In January, Ben and Victor, along with artists Corey Smith and Jeff Shaw, will unleash the 10-part Sabretooth War in the pages of Wolverine. What can you expect from this long-awaited rematch? Read on to see some of Corey and Jeff's artwork as well as what Ben and Victor have to say. How has your friendship and history impacted the way you collaborated on the 10-part Sabretooth War? Victor Laval says it's been fun collaborating with Ben because we are on the same page in so many ways. A lot of our tastes, the things that thrill and move us, trading our scripts from one issue to the next, getting notes and thoughts has been really seamlessly and comes from a long-standing sense of friendship and respect. I've been a big fan since before the comic days. Ben Percy says that he first read Victor Laval's work in 2010 when his novel Big Machine came out, and I was blown away by his Mad Hatter imagination, deeply felt characters, and luminous prose. I felt a kinship to him even then, just connecting with him on the page, because we're both horror heads with literary sensibilities. Years later, I got to know him not just in print, but in person. It never really took any effort to connect. He and I are hardwired very similarly. We love all the same books, movies, comics. We've both taught at universities. We've both worked in Hollywood in novels and comics. We're both parents of 2 kids. We speak the same language. In other words, collaborating on a project is as easy as bullshitting at the bar. Pure pleasure. We have absolute trust in one another, and we're also both jazzed by each other's ideas. So when one of us says, "What about this?" the other one usually says, "Hell yeah, let's do it." Loving the art so far from Corey Smith and Jeff Shaw over on the Sabretooth War. Also happy to see that the relationship between Victor Laval and Ben Percy is so strong here too. As X-fan Greg Katzman pointed out, Wolverine and Sabretooth have had quite a vicious rivalry over the years. In your opinion, what will make Sabretooth War stand apart from their previous conflicts? This is a really important question. I don't really know what sort of impetus makes a battle between Wolverine and Sabretooth so exciting. I hope there's going to be a really weighty answer here. On the most basic level, these two have been given free rein to really dive into the horror and mayhem of it all. These two are vicious as hardcore as they come, so it's been great to see them take the gloves off, so to speak, and really explore how bad they can be. I'm thinking more specifically of Sabretooth, who is really about the worst, lacking in any moral compass, selfish, and sociopathic, but also so fully focused on Wolverine as the object of his obsession for so long. Why might that be? That's what I wanted to explore as well, the why of it. We'll find that answer in some places that others haven't really gone before. Ben Percy says, everything Victor said plus this. Sabretooth got tossed in the pit during House of X and Powers of 10. We deliberately took him off the Krakoan stage. Victor was doing his thing all the way with the Sabretooth series, but it was all far away from Wolverine. In this way, we've built up his offstage mythology and cranked up the tension so that when those two rivals finally go head to head, it will be explosive. I want to be totally honest with you. I was looking for a more direct answer over from Ben and Victor Laval over in this article. I'm a little bit disappointed that we don't have a stronger backdrop of why these two are battling within the issue. I'm hoping they actually reveal some plot details before this winds down as a whole here. The cover to Wolverine 43 features Wolverine and Sabretooth fighting in their Team X days. Is it safe to assume Sabretooth War will revisit these moments in these rivals' shared history? We think we're going to have some good fun with their past, but we'll tackle it in ways that will be surprising to readers. Not so much a rehash of their past, but a kind of reimagining of that past in a way that serves Sabretooth's greater plan. We've seen Ben Percy really dive into the time-displaced nature of Wolverine across comic books like Lives and Deaths of Wolverine. I'm interested to see if there's going to be a sort of non-linear narrative structure for this book. Ben Percy says these two have a complicated history. They're arch enemies to one another, but there have been times where they worked as allies. We're going to dig our thumbs into the rotten spots. X-fan Phil wanted to know if the Exiles will appear during the Sabretooth War. Phil said their interactions with Creed were a great part of the previous Sabretooth miniseries, so we'd love to get them involved. Yeah, the miniseries over with Sabretooth and the Exiles were pretty strong over at Marvel. Let's see if Victor is planning on bringing any of these characters back. The Exiles will indeed be a huge part of the war. We set up something in the first Sabretooth miniseries. Doug gave Necra a very special Krakoan seed, one that she was meant to plant at Sabretooth's feet. We'll pay that off among other story beats for the Exiles. Sabretooth will not like what the seed does to him, I promise you. How interesting. What a fascinating kind of throwaway plot point. Ben, you've had the privilege of collaborating with artists Corey Smith and Jeff Shaw before. What can you share about their visual contributions to the Sabretooth War? Ben Percy says, Corey and Jeff are blowing up their inboxes every day with their mind-melting, blood-drenched, wildly mayhemic pages. They're clearly enjoying themselves. The level of detail is staggering and the energy leaps off the page. Victor and I couldn't be more lucky to have them as collaborators. Yeah, as mentioned before, I think both Corey Smith and Jeff Shaw are just fantastic creators. I'm interested to see what they bring over to the upcoming issues of this storyline. Shifting away from Sabretooth War, X-fan Jacob wanted to know what, in your opinion, makes a Wolverine story. Ben Percy says pain, hair, whiskey, blood, adamantium, and mayhem. More really strong artwork over for upcoming Wolverine and X-Force issues here. Okay, it looks like we have a question from Steve Orlando who said, "Hey Ben, longtime fan, first time questioner, and I've only got one question regarding Wolverine. Flannel core photo variant cover when?" Percy says, "Steve, you'll see me and Logan in matching buffalo plaid tuxedos at the next Hellfire Gala." The Sabretooth War officially kicks off in Wolverine issue 41 on sale January 10th. Looks like we have a cover coming in from Megan Hetrick on an upcoming Wolverine issue. Really love some of Hetrick's art over at Marvel. Salvador LaRocca. Just to be totally honest, never been a really big LaRocca fan, but appreciate the pose that he's striking over for Sabretooth. We have a Mark Bagley image here depicting a very classic costume over for Creed. Scott Williams cover over on Wolverine. Oh, always good to see Mike McKone art. I think that's a really strong expression for Sabretooth with the McKone art. But I wish that some of the proportions were pared down a little bit. I think the anatomy is a little bit strange on this one. Okay, so there you go. That is the X-Men Monday article, and it looks like Steve Orlando is going to be heading into that new series very soon here too. All right, well, I want to thank you so much for coming to check out our stream today. We'll be back over on Tuesday with some brand new DC Comics reviews, and Wednesday over for some upcoming Marvel reviews. I'm not sure yet if we're going to be streaming tomorrow. I just need some more news stories over from Marvel and DC. I'll go ahead and let you know a little bit later on today. Thank you so much for coming in and joining our stream today. Really had a blast going over all that X-Men material with you. Thank you so much once again here, and I'll see you over at Tuesday at the very latest here. Thanks so much, and I'll see you soon.